It is a Georgia football game week. I don't even know if we need to say anything else, guys, but we will. I'm Wes Blankenship, Jake Rowe, Rusty Mansell. Let's talk about Lad McConkey. Gotten a lot of questions about that guy, and seems like you might need to put him on some bubble wrap, man. Just make him the bubble boy from Seinfeld.
Lad's going to be fine, man. I mean, he may get hurt down the line, but I don't think what he's got going on right now is going to hurt him, too bad. Rusty kind of got it out there. I think he was the first guy to say anything about it. Once we didn't see Lad at practice, he said, listen, if I'm hearing that if Georgia played this week, Lad would go. And then, did some checking on it, found out he's got like some soreness, some tightness in his back. It's been a grueling camp, man. I mean, they've gotten after it, and they, Georgia's banged up going into the season, but because of it, because not necessarily because of the contact and physicality, but how hard they've worked. I mean, apparently, everybody I've talked to this scene practice has heard Kirby Smart mention the word conditioning, or getting in shape probably a dozen times per practice. I mean, it's been pretty prevalent there. So. It's not what you want to hear. It's, you'd love for everybody just to be 100%. But, when you're going into a season, if you want to prep to win a third straight title, you better put in the work. And if you put in the work, some guys are going to get dinged up.
Yeah, I don't think Kirby Smart's going to change the way he coaches. I mean, whether you're, back-to-back champs or not champs. I mean, that's just the way he's wired. That's the way he knows to be successful. And I go back to Tate Ratledge on his podcast again. Tate Ratledge says, look, I tell recruits, man, if you're coming to Georgia to chill, this ain't the place for you. We're going to practice. We're going to work hard. We're going to win a lot of games, but it's going to be physical around here, and you're going to work. This is not a place to come hang out and kind of have fun, as he said. So that's the mentality, and I think that's why Georgia – winning back-to-back national championships, people understand that this is the way it's going to be at Georgia. And those underclassmen, the freshmen and those guys are seeing what it takes, because those upperclassmen can tell them right now, this is what's about to happen in camp. And this is why we play in January.
Rusty, I want to go back to something you said months ago, and it was the whole idea that let's go to the NFL here real quick. Training camp is as physical as it gets, and it's still not that physical. For some people it is at times, but in the NFL, the contact is down. It's collectively bargained out of the game.
Yep.
So if you want a physical football player, you better go draft it. Okay.
Yep.
You're not going to develop that into a guy at that age. You better go get a guy that can do that. Well, Kirby Smart knows that in order to get great football players into his program, he needs to put them in the NFL. And in order to put them in the NFL and give them that extra edge on how to get into the NFL, you practice them hard, you practice the physicality, you teach them how to work, all of those things. And those things gets guys drafted half a round to a round higher, maybe in some instances. This is all for the benefit of the program. And I know there are folks out there that are like, man, enough's enough. We got to do this. We got to do that, back off. Hey, there are times when your weaknesses are your strengths to an extreme. And this is one of those things that this preseason, that as hard as Georgia works and as physical as they are and as much as they demand of their players, sometimes those players are going to get dinged up. The good news for Georgia is that one of those injuries, just one right now, it has been considered kind of a season ender, a significant one. That's not, that's a good thing at this point, because
it was non-contact.
Right, exactly. 100%, Wes. That's a good point. And non-contact on a guy that was probably limited to begin with a foot injury. So ultimately you got these bumps and bruises, but these guys are going to come back. And honestly, shoot, man, who's to say they won't have a little more tread on the tires? I know this. When Kendall Milton was running the ball against Ohio State last year in game 14, like he had a little juice. It looked like a guy that had maybe missed some time and got a little, was able to kind of keep a little bit more tread on the tires than maybe, you would have, expected for a back in game 14.
Yeah, he had brand new tires.
Yeah, definitely. Branson Robinson, I know he's not playing, but when he came in against TCU, they had to be thinking, what the hell is going on? Like, what, can you get the license plate on this dude? What is this thing coming off the sideline this late in the game? I'll say this real quick. I was very, very lucky and very, very fortunate to probably 4 or 5 years ago. I got to sit with the head scout of an NFL team, and I had questions for him, and I wanted to ask him how they evaluate things. And one of the things that he said I will not forget is about offensive linemen and how the NFL is having problems finding people that can come off of the ball. Not just run, not just pass blockers, somebody that can just mirror somebody. Obviously, that's very valuable, but it's still the NFL, and you still got to find people that are physical, that can move people, that can run, just reestablish a line of scrimmage. And if you think about the amount of college teams, honestly, they're doing what's best for them, because if you can't find those bodies, you got to throw the ball around all over. But he didn't specifically mention Georgia, but I can assure you the practices that Georgia has, offensively and defensively, but specifically when you start talking about offensive linemen, look at the kids that's been drafted from Georgia. Maybe they think, listen, these guys this is what we need. But the one thing I'll tell you is when we start talking about those physical practices, I'm sure there's some schools that probably try to use that against Georgia, but they can combat that real easy and probably show all kind of information and packets and testimonials from scouts going, we're going to take a long look at you at Georgia because we know we're getting a physical product that knows how to push himself.
And those physical practices make sure that those NFL logos shows up out there on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday every week.
Yeah, it's their training camp before training camp. I heard Calvin Ridley speak his rookie year as a Falcon, and he was wearing long sleeves out to a training camp in July. And that was like the story of the training camp because, of course, no real news was going to come out of that. But someone asked him, why are you wearing long sleeves? And he said, well, Coach Saban never let us wear long sleeves at practice. And it just comes down to that rudimentary approach to how disciplined the practices are. He finally had a little bit of freedom and he wore some sleeves. Now, he did some other things too, and that's why he's a Jacksonville Jaguar right now. But that lack of or that discipline rather shows through in little things like that. How much more physical, if at all, was this training camp, do you think, just to keep everybody focused? And that's not just a Kirby thing. I believe that the leaders on the team probably instilled a little bit of that as well.
I don't know that it would be any more physical. I mean, this is what you're going to do at Georgia. I mean, they may have some days where maybe Kirby's pissed off and we're going to do a little more. But, I go back to the 2021 SEC championship game, and you guys both covered that. And you remember it, and that coming back after I think they beat Michigan, Kirby finally talked about what it was like those 3 weeks in between. He goes, we didn't sit around and pout. We went to work, and I pushed these kids. And we ran extra and we did all these things. We worked even harder. So that doing things like that and little things like those 3 weeks, because I'll say it, Georgia looked out of shape in that game. And, the players were kind of defense, especially defensive line. Heck, they hadn't played much. They've been blowing teams out. And I think that those 3 weeks in between, I heard those practices, man, they were getting after each other really good. So, with that being said, I don't think it's going to be any different ever, fall camp at Georgia in spring practice. This is what you're going to do. These kids are going to graduate. The next group's going to come in, and they're going to be told from the upperclassmen, hey, you better buckle it up, man, because we're about to get after it right here. And I remember them talking about Tate and those guys on their podcast. Again, we're talking about they talked to some of the NFL guys, and they were like, yeah, man, we have 5 full pad practices the entire camp of NFL camp. And they're like, dude, we have 5 full pad practices the first 10 days of camp. So kind of tells you the difference.
Georgia has 2 a week.
Yeah, 2 a week. Yeah,
all season long.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Wes, I don't think it was any more physical, because I think the only reason you make it more physical is if they're not really doing it to begin with. And I think that all of the things that, they're not meeting the standard the first time around. You're having to make them do it again and again and again. And one of the things we've heard out of this camp, Rusty's kind of told his version of it with the story he shared with us over at DawgsHQ about a prominent player who kind of showed some kindness to a manager Great story over there, and that leadership and that kind of togetherness is all there. Kirby said before last scrimmage that this is the best leadership he's had on a team at Georgia. So the leadership is there. So I think they're doing it right. I do think, though, going back to something Rusty just brought up about the blowouts, honestly, like, you'd never get Kirby to admit this, but Kirby knows that UT Martin is in game 1, and he knows that Ball State's in game 2, and he knows that UAB's in game 4. Not necessarily to the point that he's coaching them different, but I think that has got something to do with this conditioning thing that he's been pressing is, hey, there's a lot of players going to play a lot of snaps in these 3 out of these first 4 games. Heck, maybe the whole month of September. Is it going to surprise anybody if Georgia wins 5 games in September by an average of 30 points a game? Probably not.
No.
Okay. And 3 or 4 of those are going to be home games. I think that they know that that a lot of guys are going to get on the field that are probably not going to play, everybody, 3 quarters, 4 quarters of ball. So, hey, let's get them going. Let's work them really hard during camp. We can always, scale back and let them repair. But the one thing you can't do is you can't go back and get some extra conditioning in 5 days ago. The DeLorean does not work.
Apparently it's working for Benny the Rolling Stoner in our comment section because he claims to be a time traveler and has said that Georgia will go 9-3 and also 10-2. So the timeline diverging, I guess, at some point in the year. I'd love to go back and listen to Georgia's players from 2016 to 2017 because the guys that were there for the end of the Mark Richt era getting a rude awakening from how Kirby wanted to run his practices, I imagine.
Hey, those dudes right now, they'd be hurting this summer, Rusty.
Yeah,
they'd be hurting this summer. They'd be begging for that indoor.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt.